Hello and welcome to the Bitcoinlens. This is episode 18. A lot of interesting news this week in the Bitcoin world. Kind of the first thing I wanted to go over was Trump's news of apparently word on the street is he now wants to remove all capital gains on Bitcoin and pretty much all crypto. So I thought that was kind of interesting because that will essentially mean that we're going to have legal tender on Bitcoin. You can sell your Bitcoin, doesn't matter when you bought it, doesn't matter if you traded it. If you sell your Bitcoin or you exchange your Bitcoin for any other thing, whether it's a physical thing, another crypto, or a fiat currency with zero capital gains, that essentially means we got legal tender. So I thought that was really interesting news this week. And I'm going to keep an eye on that one because if that will pass, that will really is actually really smart. I mean, if you think about it, we now have about 1.7 trillion market cap in Bitcoin, and if you can open the floodgates by allowing zero capital gains, the U.S. economy is really going to be soaring, and people are not going to be sitting on their Bitcoin like they may do if capital gains is so high on that. So or if there's any other taxes on that. If they can use that as legal tender, you're going to see more businesses grow, more businesses accept Bitcoin. You're going to have more Bitcoin specific businesses, and then your consumers are going to not want to sit on their Bitcoin so much, and they'll happily spend it. So I'm super excited about this. Even for me, I'm not really one of those people who are even thinking about spending my Bitcoin, but with some policy like this, I may even consider it. So super exciting. I mean, I could just imagine walking up and purchasing a house with a Bitcoin and having zero tax on that. That would be super attractive, and I'm going to keep an eye on that one. But just to kind of, for those of you maybe not familiar with the capital gains rates here in the U.S., so if you're pretty much making as a married couple between $89,000 and $550,000 a year, you're paying about 15% capital gains. Now, short-term capital gains, that's less than 1 year. You're just going to pay whatever income tax bracket you are in. So just depending what kind of income you have. And then, like I said, on the long-term capital gains, it's 15% if you make between 89,000 and 550,000 for a married couple. And if you make more than that as a married couple, you're looking at 20% long-term capital gains. So, a lot of really wealthy people out there making way more than 550,000 a year. They're going to be super excited about this, saving that 20% on essentially tender or exchange. In other news, I saw Senator Loomis. She's proposing to sell the Federal Reserve's gold. So the U.S. Federal Reserve's gold in exchange for Bitcoin. So we know Senator Loomis, she was super loud about Bitcoin at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville earlier this year, and super exciting stuff. She's actually the one who came up with the whole Bitcoin strategic reserve idea, and that was kind of the plan that Trump adopted. So they're pretty close on this. But I thought this one was kind of wild. Looking at them selling the U.S. Federal Reserve gold, just to kind of give you an idea. I believe as of Q2 2024, the U.S. had about 8,000 metric tons of gold. That's about roughly the equivalent, depending on the day at which you look at the price, it's about $600 billion in gold. So that's crazy. That's the largest gold reserve in the world, just for a little bit of perspective there. So we'll see how that works. I'm not quite sure how that's going to play out in Congress and how that's going to look, but boy, oh boy, that would be exciting, and that will really put the U.S. on the front of the Bitcoin reserves, if you will. So definitely keeping an eye on that one. And even if it's not even all the gold, like let's just say a fraction of the gold, let's say 5% of our gold tally, 5% of 600 billion. That's a huge amount. In other news, I saw, and some of you may have seen this. This is pretty good news for us. So I did mention on the previous podcast episode that Gary Genssler, the chair of the SEC, he's going to step down and resign. And I mean, writing is on the wall. Trump's going to fire him anyway, right? So he's got to step down. He's been super anti-crypto, Operation Choke Point, just really strangling the ETF industry and just the crypto industry, not just Bitcoin, but crypto industry in general, the 3 trillion crypto industry. Just super unconstitutional what he's been doing. And 18 U.S. states came out this week and said they're going to sue the SEC and Gary Gensler. And they're essentially, they're suing the SEC for unconstitutional overreach and unfair persecution of the crypto industry under said Gary Gensler. And this is according to Fox Business. Now, just kind of unpeeling this the layer of the onion here. The lawsuit alleges that the agency's industry-wide crackdown on U.S. crypto companies is unconstitutional because it violates fundamental principles of federalism, which ensure that government agencies operate within their constitutionally defined roles. So basically, just saying SEC overstepped the line. They didn't stay in their swim lane, and they were targeting the crypto industry because they're seeing this giant trend coming, and they don't know how to stop it. So the only way they could stop it is by really playing a little bit dirty with with their big stick of the SEC and Gary Gensler. So very, very good to see this, and I'm kind of curious. I'll keep an eye on that. I'll give an update on the following episodes if there's any kind of something that comes from this lawsuit here against the SEC and Gary Gensler. Moving on to BlackRock. BlackRock, they actually broke their Bitcoin ETF inflow record. So on Wednesday, November 13th, they broke their inflow record and they did 5 billion in trading volume for the first time. So that is unbelievable. What a mammoth number that is. Just to kind of give you an idea, they hold about $42 billion in Bitcoin ETFs as of November 15th. So I guess 2 days ago, 42 billion. In one day they traded, there was $5 billion worth of trade within BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF. So unbelievable numbers there. BlackRock's still setting the trend there, setting the lead there, and I thought that was kind of crazy to hear those numbers. Kind of on the point of Bitcoin's pricing and all that, obviously that accounts for that trading, but Bitcoin market cap just keeps gobbling up the leaderboard. And I saw this week that Bitcoin now surpassed oil company Saudi Aramco, so biggest oil company in the world. And basically now Bitcoin has surpassed them to become the seventh largest asset in the world by market cap. So Bitcoin right now is about 1.8 trillion in market cap. Saudi Aramco is in the low 1.7 trillion. And this is absolutely incredible. So of course we know gold is still at 17 trillion. I still think Bitcoin's coming for gold. They're going to gobble that up. But next in line on that leaderboard is going to be Alphabet, that's in sixth place, and Amazon in fifth place. Both of them are at 2.1 trillion. So I think that's where we're going next. We're definitely overtaking Alphabet and Amazon. I wouldn't be surprised if this even happens in 2025, honestly. So just crazy. They're just, I mean, as much as I believe in Bitcoin, seeing stats and seeing numbers like that and seeing how it compares to other assets in the world and how it's just kind of gobbling them all up is still mind blowing, even for someone like me who's super focused on Bitcoin and super convinced by Bitcoin. Moving on to the state side and Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania announced a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So they announced that this week, and this was according to Dennis Porter. With Dennis Porter, if you're not familiar, I mentioned him in a previous episode. He's the CEO of the Satoshi Act Fund, and he's essentially we can really give him credit for orange pilling a bunch of these states, and bunch of states really just coming on board with the strategic reserve, and it's not just strategic reserves, but also just implementing more pro Bitcoin policy. And that is what the Satoshi Act Fund essentially does there with Dennis Porter. So he just confirmed that. And I also saw a tweet from him this week that he said he's got some really big news still to come, and from multiple sources. So I don't know. Ever since the election, I feel like the states are really jumping on this train right now. So I'll keep an eye on Dennis Porter, see what else he has to say. But I think I'm going to predict here in the coming weeks we're going to predict way more states jumping on this train. So really good for Pennsylvania there, and really good to see that. Really good to see that they're so pro Bitcoin. On some of the company side, we saw Thumbs Up Media Corp, just the media corporation there. They're publicly listed, and they also announced Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. Also, Semler Scientific, I mentioned them earlier this year for setting up a strategic reserve, and they are now going further. This is a marketing technology company. If you're not familiar with them, they do developing and marketing technology, and they purchased an additional 47 Bitcoin this week for worth $3 million. So Semler Scientific now holds roughly just over 1,000 Bitcoin, and depending on when you look this week, it's about $71 million worth of Bitcoin. So unbelievable to see that, and unbelievable to see some of these little baby examples of MicroStrategy and following the Michael Saylor playbook. Not 100% the Michael Saylor playbook, but the strategic reserve 100% is. And I haven't seen any evidence from these companies doing convertible notes or anything like that, like Saylor. But needless to say, this is still phenomenal news for corporate America and just for the price of Bitcoin. If you're a holder anywhere, just remember, you don't have to be in the US to take advantage of these prices and, US companies, US states, US policy, US presidents adopting all this. I mean, you can hold your Bitcoin anywhere, and this is amazing news for everyone. So just keep that in mind as I go through some of this stuff. Also, going onto the international side, United Arab Emirates, they've become even more pro Bitcoin policy. They've even have a more pro Bitcoin policy. I know I mentioned them on almost all the episodes that I've had on this podcast, just because I just see so much news coming from that side of the world. But the crypto exchange M2 announced that it will allow residents in the UAE to buy and sell Bitcoin and Ether using their bank account. So they basically can convert their local currency, which is the dirhams. They can convert that local currency directly into Bitcoin and back and forth. They can basically trade their local currency back and forth within their bank account. So really interesting news there from UAE, and this is going to be really just this is going to provide so much more access to UAE residents and give them more exposure to Bitcoin on the fly and just ease of use, right? Like we always say, Bitcoin is great, but the accessibility is a little intimidating for some, when you look outside of ETFs. So seeing news like this is really promising. So kudos to UAE there, and I'll definitely keep following them, but this is super exciting. And then finally, I just wanted to end out with, some of my current optimism, what I'm seeing in Bitcoin, and why I still think, guys, the price is still super, super low. I'm not focused on the price, but I do think the price is super low. It is super, super low. Some of the things that are really optimistic for me is if you look at the Trump policies that are incoming that haven't even been implemented, guys. We're really talking about stuff that he said, like back in July, stuff that Loomis said. We're looking at some of the people he's surrounded with. He's surrounded by a lot of Bitcoiners. But honestly, the Trump policies incoming, specifically for me, strategic Bitcoin reserve, pro Bitcoin taxation policies, being pro self custody, that's a big one for me. And so that's really that on the Trump side. That's kind of some of the optimistic stuff that I'm looking for there. Also, I think the supply shock is also incoming. I'm seeing more and more and more Bitcoin, leaving the exchanges, and we're at a very low right now on the exchanges. So I think we're going to see a supply shock on the exchanges as well, which is going to even boost the price even more once everyone jumps on board. More news, Gary Gensler, getting his finger off that big SEC stick. That is very promising. And maybe getting Hester Pierce in there, someone a little bit more pro Bitcoin, like the SEC commissioner, Hester Pierce. I think that's the word on the street. She's going to take over from him. We'll see how this lawsuit goes, but we know he's already resigning. So just getting the federal government staying out of our business a little bit with the SEC and really putting that big stick on the crypto industry, I think that's going to be super promising that's going away. I mentioned on previous episodes Microsoft voting on buying Bitcoin. So that's going to finish off in December. If I'm not mistaken, December 6th or 9th is when that's finishing. And that will basically give the shareholders that final decision on whether they want Microsoft to invest in Bitcoin. So that's keep an eye on that one. Also, Treasury Secretary news. So, word on the street is Howard Lutnick. He may be the new U.S. Treasury Secretary. So, super big Bitcoiner, this guy. He owns a lot of Bitcoin. I mean, millions and millions worth of Bitcoin. And Cantor Fitzgerald, it's a financial asset company. They've got assets under management, I think about 13 billion, and they've implemented a Bitcoin policy there as well, Bitcoin strategic reserve there. So I saw Howard at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville earlier this year. Super pro Bitcoin. So just having, we're looking at the SEC, we're looking at the Treasury Secretary, we're looking at the Doge guys, Elon and Vivek, you're looking at JD Vance, RFK with the HHS, you're looking at Tulsi, Director of National Intelligence, and Donald Trump. Oh my gosh, we're just surrounded by a Bitcoin admin. So I can't look at this any other way as extremely promising. And then my final point I wanted to make here on why I have optimism for the price is I believe you're going to see countries and certain companies trying to front run what Donald Trump is about to do once he becomes president. So we know he's said all the things he's said, and we know all the promises he's made about Bitcoin, and we don't even know all the things he's going to do. I think he's going to go really extreme on Bitcoin policy as far as like pro Bitcoin. But I'm already seeing countries and companies trying to get ahead of this. They're buying more. I'm seeing it way more expedited in the last 2 weeks than I have in the previous months. And you're seeing state pension funds, you're seeing states, you're seeing companies, you're seeing educational institutions and countries adopting all kinds of pro-Bitcoin policy and stacking those strategic Bitcoin reserves. So that is all I have for this week. Hopefully that was insightful. I'll see you all next week. Thanks for listening and have a great week next week. Thank you.